I'm going to tell you about the night I died. Not the kind of death where you stop breathing and your heart quits, though that would have been cleaner, honestly. No, this was the kind where you keep walking around, keep talking, keep making decisions, all while watching yourself disappear piece by piece. The night was June 14th, and I was live streaming to 47,000 people when I realized the world was ending. My name is Cale Mercer, and if you're hearing this, it means I stayed human long enough to finish the story. The thing about the end of the world is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets or dramatic music. It starts with something mundane, a police scanner crackling in the background while you're trying to explain to your subscribers why the MRE rations from 2019 are still technically edible. And I'd been a survival content creator for 3 years. 2 years as an Army combat medic before that, and another 2 as an EMT before I decided the adrenaline wasn't worth the pay. My studio in Millbrook, Pennsylvania was crammed with gear I'd tested, maps I'd studied, and enough emergency supplies to make my neighbors nervous. They'd complained twice about my suspicious activities, which basically meant I wore tactical gear in my front yard and talked to a camera about water filtration. But that night, the chat was moving faster than usual. Messages were flooding in about animal attacks downtown, about emergency services overwhelmed, about something that didn't add up. I had the police scanner turned low, background noise, while I rambled about fire starting techniques in wet conditions, and then dispatch's voice cracked through with something I'd never heard before. Genuine fear. All units. We have a mass casualty situation at Millbrook General. Multiple victims down, attackers exhibiting extreme aggression, and Jesus Christ, Mike, they're not responding to commands. Officer Reynolds just discharged his weapon center mass and the suspect is still advancing. I stopped mid-sentence. My hand moved to turn up the scanner volume before my brain caught up. The chat exploded with messages, viewer count jumping from 47,000 to 60,000 in seconds. People knew. They were watching this happen in real time across the country, and they'd come to my channel because I was the guy who always said he'd see it coming, except I hadn't seen it coming, none of us had. And I pulled up traffic camera feeds on my secondary monitor, something I'd set up years ago when I was paranoid about civil unrest patterns. Downtown Millbrook looked wrong, people running in that desperate animal way that meant life or death. Behind them, others were moving differently. Jerky, wrong, like puppets with cut strings trying to remember how to walk. Guys, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. I need everyone in the Millbrook area to lock your doors right now. This isn't a drill. This pattern matches outbreak protocols I've documented. Multiple vectors, aggressive transmission, overwhelming emergency services within minutes. If you're watching this and you're local, you need to... That's when Lyra screamed downstairs. The sound cut through everything. The scanner chatter, and the chat exploding with comments, my own racing thoughts. It was raw terror, the kind you can't fake, and it came from the woman who was 7 months pregnant with my daughter. I grabbed my Springfield XD from under the desk, already moving, and the camera was still recording because my hand hadn't let go. Force of habit. Document everything. Make sure someone knows what happened. The stairs felt longer than they should have been, my boots loud on the hardwood, and I could hear Lyra shouting something about the back door. When I hit the kitchen, I understood why. The door wasn't just open, it was destroyed. The steel-reinforced frame I'd installed specifically for scenarios like this was splintered, the deadbolt still engaged but torn clean through the wood, and something had wanted inside badly enough to go through a door that could withstand a battering ram. Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, swaying. She was 73 years old, made us cookies every Christmas, and power walked past our house every morning at 6:30 like clockwork. She'd lived alone since her husband died 5 years ago, and we'd checked on her during the winter storm last year when her furnace died. She was the kind of neighbor who made suburban life tolerable. Now she wasn't Mrs. Chen anymore. Her eyes were black. Not the pupils dilated, but the entire eye, like someone had injected ink directly into the sockets. Dark veins crawled up her neck, visible even in the dim kitchen light, pulsing in a rhythm that didn't match a heartbeat. When she turned toward me, there was no recognition, no humanity. Just hunger. Even Mrs. Chen, my voice sounded distant, professional, like I was still in medic mode. "Can you hear me?" She made a sound, not words, a wet, rattling hiss that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Then she moved, and the speed was all wrong. No 73-year-old should move like that, low and fast predator muscles that shouldn't have existed. I'd trained for close-quarters combat in the army, knew the theory. But theory doesn't prepare you for fighting someone you know, someone who baked you cookies, someone whose husband's funeral you attended. The camera was still in my left hand, recording everything for 70,000 viewers now. And I did the only thing I could think of. I swung it at her face. $1,200 of equipment connected with her jaw. She didn't even flinch. We went down hard, in my back slamming against the kitchen island, and she was on top of me, those black eyes inches from mine. Her breath smelled like rotten meat, and her hands found my throat with surprising strength. I could hear Lyra screaming from inside the pantry where she'd barricaded herself, could hear the chat notifications still pinging from the camera, could feel my vision starting to narrow. Combat breathing. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. It was muscle memory from deployments, from situations that weren't supposed to happen on American soil. I grabbed her wrists, used her momentum to roll, putting myself on top. My gun had skittered under the fridge during the initial impact. The camera was cracked but still recording, showing everyone their favorite survival YouTuber getting his ass handed to him by an elderly woman. "Fire extinguisher!" Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. "Kale, by the stove!" I looked up. The red canister was mounted 3 feet away, but Mrs. Chen's teeth were snapping at my forearm, and getting there meant letting go of her wrists. She scrambled up with this horrible insect-like speed that wasn't natural, wasn't possible, and I made a choice. Forget the extinguisher. I grabbed the chef's knife from the counter, the 8-inch Wusthof we'd gotten as a wedding gift that we'd never actually gotten married to use. "I'm sorry," I said to her, or to what used to be her. "I'm so sorry." She lunged again, and this time I didn't hesitate. The blade went in easier than I expected, and the sound she made wasn't human. I forced her back, using the kitchen table as a shield, driving her toward the basement door, and when she came at me again, I sidestepped and pushed. She tumbled down the stairs with a series of impacts that would have killed a normal person. She wasn't normal anymore. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. We stood there in the ruined kitchen, me covered in blood that wasn't mine. Lyra emerging from the pantry, pale and shaking, both of us listening to Mrs. Chen thrashing around in our basement, making sounds that didn't belong in our world. "Are you hurt?" Lyra's voice was small, controlled in that way she got when she was terrified and trying not to show it. I looked down. My left forearm had a deep bite mark, already purpling, blood seeping through my torn shirt. Mrs. Chen had gotten me during the struggle, and I'd been so focused on staying alive that I hadn't processed it until now. "Yeah," I said quietly. She got me." Lyra's face did this thing where all the color drained out at once, and I saw her hand move to her stomach, protecting the baby. 7 months pregnant, due in 8 weeks. And her boyfriend just got bitten by something that shouldn't exist. "Kale." "We don't know what this is yet," I interrupted, though we both knew I was lying. "Could be rabies. Could be some new prion disease. I need to clean it, wrap it, monitor for symptoms." The first aid kit was still in its place on the shelf where I'd restocked it 2 weeks ago, back when the world made sense. I cleaned the wound with shaking hands, muscle memory from EMT training taking over while my brain tried to process what had just happened. Lyra pulled up her laptop and I could see the fear in her eyes as she scrolled through news feeds. It's everywhere, she said. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York. Videos from Boston showing people attacking police. Kale, this isn't isolated, this is pandemic-level outbreak pattern, I finished. The words tasted like ashes. Multiple simultaneous infection zones, overwhelming first responders, spreading faster than containment protocols can establish. The hospitals will be overrun within hours if they're not already. A truck horn blared outside, cutting through our conversation. I moved to the window, gun retrieved from under the fridge, and saw Daxon Reed's lifted F-350 in my driveway. The bed was loaded with plastic totes, ammunition boxes, and what looked like half the inventory from his garage. Daxon had been my best friend since 7th grade when he'd gotten suspended for punching Derek Mills in the face after Derek had mocked my dad's deployment photos. He'd done 2 tours with the Marines, came back with a 1,000-yard stare and an encyclopedic knowledge of weapons maintenance, and settled into running a mechanic shop in town while preparing for the end of the world in his spare time. He climbed out of the truck wearing full tactical gear, shotgun slung over his shoulder, and the look on his face when he saw me through the window was pure relief. Then he saw the bandage on my arm and everything shut down. "You got bit," he said when I opened the door. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "How long ago?" "Maybe 30 minutes, could be 40 by now." He chambered a round in the shotgun. "Brother, you know what I have to do." "Dax?" "I watched my CO turn in Fallujah," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. 40 seconds from screaming for a medic to trying to bite my face off. I'm not watching that happen to you, I can't. Lyra stepped between us, and even 7 months pregnant, she had this presence that made grown men reconsider their choices. Nobody is shooting anybody until we know for sure what's happening. Kale isn't showing symptoms. We observe, we document. That's the protocol. There is no protocol for this. Daxon's hands were shaking on the shotgun. Turn on any goddamn channel, people are dying. The whole country is going to hell, and you want to wait and see if my best friend turns into one of those things? That's exactly what we're doing, Lyra said, and her voice had that quiet steel that meant the discussion was over. The 3 of us stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our normal lives, while the police scanner crackled with increasingly desperate transmissions and my live stream camera kept recording everything for an audience that had grown to over 100,000 people. Finally, Daxon lowered the shotgun. 12 hours. Initial reports are saying 12 hours from exposure to symptoms. If you're still human by dawn, then we figure out next steps, but if you start showing signs, you'll do what needs to be done, I said. I know. We shook hands, and I could feel how careful he was not to touch the bandage on my arm, like infection could spread through casual contact. Maybe it could. We didn't know. And that was the worst part. We didn't know anything. Daxon started unloading his truck, and the amount of supplies he'd brought was both impressive and terrifying. He'd clearly raided his workshop, his apartment, maybe some other places. MRE rations, water filtration systems, ammunition for weapons I didn't know he owned, medical supplies that looked like they'd been lifted from a hospital. Where'd you get all this? I asked. You really want to know? I decided I didn't. The world was ending. Normal rules didn't apply anymore. We spent the next hours fortifying the house, and this time it wasn't a fun project for my YouTube channel. This was survival. Daxon knew what he was doing. Marines had taught him field fortification, and his mechanical skills meant he could improvise solutions with whatever we had on hand. And we boarded up the weaker windows, reinforced the doors, set up motion sensors on the tree line. I showed him my emergency supplies, the ones I'd been building for years that everyone thought were paranoid overkill, and for once he didn't make fun of me for having 17 different ways to start a fire. Lyra worked on inventory, her engineering background showing as she calculated water needs, food rationing, supply usage over time. She'd always been the practical one, the person who could look at a disaster scenario and immediately start optimizing logistics. It was one of the reasons I'd fallen for her 2 years ago when we met at a preparedness expo where I was doing a panel on wilderness survival, and she was presenting on sustainable agriculture in crisis situations. We have food for 3 months if we're careful, she announced. Water isn't an issue with the well, but we're low on medical supplies. Specifically, I'm almost out of prenatal vitamins. I froze mid-hammer swing. How low? 2 weeks, maybe 3 if I stretch them, but the baby needs proper nutrition and I can't just skip doses. 7 months pregnant, in a zombie apocalypse, with limited medical supplies, the math wasn't good. We'll figure it out, I said, but the words felt hollow. The police scanner crackled with Sheriff Thorne Keaton's voice, and hearing it brought me back to 5 years ago when he'd shown up at my house because someone had reported suspicious military activities in my front yard. I'd been filming tactical movement drills in full gear, which apparently made neighbors nervous enough to call the cops. Thorne had been ready to shut down my whole operation until I'd shown him what I was actually doing, explained the educational content angle, and demonstrated that I knew what I was talking about. We'd become friends after that, or at least friendly acquaintances who respected each other's competence. Now his voice over the scanner sounded like he'd aged 20 years in a single night. All units, downtown is lost. Repeat, downtown is lost. We're establishing a fallback position at the high school. If you can hear this, make your way there. We'll hold as long as we can. They won't hold long, Daxon said quietly. High school's got too many entry points, too many windows. It's a death trap. He was right. But people were scared and they'd flock to anywhere that sounded official. The high school would be packed within hours, and when the infected broke through, not if, when, it would be a massacre. I checked my bite wound, pulling back the bandage carefully. The area was swollen, hot to the touch, angry red. But the veins around it were normal, pink and healthy. Not like Mrs. Chen's, with those black threads crawling under her skin. Nothing yet, I said. Yet, Daxon repeated, and there was no hope in his voice. Lyra made pasta because that's what she did when the world fell apart. She cooked. It was her way of maintaining control, of pretending things were normal. We ate in silence, the scanner filling the void with increasingly desperate transmissions. The hospital had been breached, the police station was being evacuated, and the high school was already under siege. Downtown Millbrook was gone. Just gone. In less than 6 hours, a town of 3,200 people had fallen. I sat at the kitchen table, checking my wound every few minutes, waiting to turn into a monster. And I thought about Mrs. Chen, about the fact that she was still in our basement making inhuman sounds, about how I'd known her for 5 years and never even learned her first name. I'd called her Mrs. Chen because that's what everyone called her. And now she was dead, or worse than dead, and I didn't even know her first name. The camera was still recording, battery at 30%. I'd need to charge it soon, but part of me didn't want to stop recording. If I became one of those things, at least there would be a record. At least someone would know what happened. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too beautiful for the end of the world. I'd been awake for over 24 hours, checking my wound every 30 minutes, documenting everything. Temperature, normal. Blood pressure, elevated but probably from stress. Cognitive function, intact. Motor control, fine. Black veins, none. 12 hours after Mrs. Chen bit me, I was still human. Daxon had dozed off around 3 a.m., shotgun across his lap, and Lyra had fallen asleep on the couch around 4. I'd stayed up, watching the windows, monitoring the scanner, and trying to understand why I wasn't dead or worse. When Daxon woke up and saw me still conscious and coherent, the look on his face was complicated. Relief, maybe. or disappointment that he wouldn't get the clean solution of putting me down before I turned. I couldn't tell, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I got into a fight with an old lady and barely survived." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know what you're asking. I feel fine. Human. Whatever this is, I'm not showing symptoms." He checked his phone, still had signal barely, and showed me the screen. News reports were talking about 12-hour incubation periods. Anyone who got bitten was supposed to turn within 12 hours. 8 hours was the longest documented survival before symptoms appeared. I was past that now. "You're immune," Lyra said from the couch. She'd been awake, apparently, just listening. "Cale, you survived a bite. That's not possible. But you did it." "We don't know that. Maybe I just got lucky, maybe." A Crown Vic pulled up outside and Sheriff Keaton climbed out, moving like every muscle hurt. His uniform was torn, dirty, and there was blood on his shoes. He saw me through the window and I could see him processing the bandage on my arm, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "Sheriff," I called from the doorway, keeping my hands visible in the Springfield at my side where he could see it. "You okay?" "Cale." His voice was rough, exhausted. "Son, I need you to tell me something honestly. Are you infected?" "I was bitten 12 hours ago, no symptoms." 12 hours. He seemed to consider this. "Longest I've seen anyone last is 8. After that, they turn. You're either very lucky or very special." "What happened in town?" He looked back toward Millbrook Center, where smoke rose from multiple buildings, and the expression on his face was something I'd only seen once before. On my old CO's face in Afghanistan when we'd lost half a platoon to an IED. "Gone," he said simply. "We had maybe 200 infected by midnight. Tried to establish a perimeter at the courthouse. They overwhelmed us in 15 minutes. Lost most of my department. The ones who didn't die." He didn't finish the sentence. "How many survived?" "In town? Maybe 50 if they stayed quiet and locked down. The infected are drawn to noise, movement. They hunt." Daxon had joined me at the door. "State Police, National Guard?" "Lost contact with State around 2 a.m. The last transmission said Pittsburgh was being evacuated. Guard's supposed to be establishing a quarantine line east of here, but..." He shook his head. "I wouldn't count on help coming." "What's the plan then?" "Survive. That's all we can do." He looked at our house, the boarded windows, the cleared sight lines, the defensive positions Daxon and I had established. "Your place is defensible. You have water?" "Well, water with a hand pump backup." "Food?" 3 months rationed." "Then hunker down, stay quiet, don't attract attention." He handed me his police radio. "Keep this. If something happens to me, at least someone will have situational awareness." "Where are you going?" "Route 22. Got a call about a school bus with engine trouble. Driver said she had 20 kids on board. I'm going to try to get them out." "Sheriff, that's..." Daxon started. "Suicide?" Thorne smiled without humor. "Probably. But I didn't put on this badge to hide when kids need help. You take care of yourselves. And Cale? Whatever you've got that kept you from turning, figure it out. It might be important." He drove away, and 30 minutes later the radio crackled to life with his voice. "This is Sheriff Keaton. I've reached the bus. 23 children, 1 adult, preparing for extraction." Static washed over the transmission. "Contact. Multiple infected approaching from the south. Estimate 15 to 20 hostiles." Gunfire, clear and sharp over the radio speakers. "Kids are panicking. Driver won't leave the bus. Get back. Get away from..." More gunfire, screaming, and then sounds that I'd only heard once before during a field hospital rotation when we couldn't save someone fast enough. "Help me. Somebody there." The transmission cut out. Just static after that. Lyra turned off the radio because none of us could stand listening to the empty noise. We sat there in silence, processing the fact that a good man had just died trying to save 23 kids who were probably dead too. He knew, I said finally. He knew it was suicide and he went anyway. That's what the good ones do, Daxon said quietly. They die first. I looked at my bite wound again. It was healing, actually healing faster than it should. The swelling had gone down, the redness was fading, and when I flexed my fingers there was no pain. 12 hours ago I'd been bitten by an infected, and now it looked like a week-old injury. Something was wrong with me, or right with me. I couldn't tell which. Before I could process that thought, the radio crackled with a new voice. This one was different, digital, processed, broadcast on multiple emergency frequencies simultaneously. Attention survivors. This is Dr. Vesper Holland broadcasting from a secure research facility. If you or anyone you know has demonstrated resistance to infection, specifically, surviving exposure for more than 8 hours without symptoms, please respond on this frequency. We are working on a treatment and require test subjects. Protection, medical care, and compensation will be provided for volunteers. I repeat, we are seeking individuals who have shown natural immunity to the infection. Please respond if you meet these criteria. The three of us looked at each other. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Lyra said, "That's you. Kale, you survived the bite. You need to..." "Need to what?" Daxon interrupted. "Trust some random voice on the radio asking immune survivors to give up their location. That's how people get rounded up and disappeared." "Or it's how we find a cure," Lyra argued. "If she's really working on a treatment, then she can publish her findings on the internet like normal scientists," Daxon finished. "I'm not trusting anyone who broadcasts on emergency frequencies asking for test subjects. That's predator behavior." I watched them argue, but my mind was elsewhere. Test subjects, natural immunity, working on a treatment. The words felt wrong somehow, like there was information hiding between them. I keyed the radio. "This is Cale Mercer. I'm listening." Daxon made a noise of frustration, but Lyra nodded. She understood. If there was a chance, even a small one, that my immunity meant something, that it could help develop a cure, we had to take it. Dr. Holland's response came immediately, like she'd been waiting by the radio. "Mr. Mercer, your name is familiar. You're the documentary filmmaker, correct? The survival content creator?" "That's me. I was live streaming when the outbreak started. Got about 100,000 people watching me realize the world was ending." "Fascinating. And you've been exposed to infection?" "Bit by an infected neighbor 12 hours ago. No symptoms." There was a pause. And when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that made my skin crawl. Hunger. Interest. The tone a scientist uses when they find an unexpected variable in their experiment. 12 hours. That's remarkable, Mr. Mercer. I need you to document everything. Wound appearance, temperature fluctuations, any neurological changes. Can you do that? Already am. Occupational hazard. Excellent. What's your supply situation? Daxon was making frantic cutting motions across his throat, signaling me to stop talking. But I was already committed. Stable. 3 months of food, clean water, medical supplies. And your location? I can arrange extraction if you'd prefer somewhere more secure. With all due respect, Doctor, I'm not broadcasting my address over an open channel. You understand? Of course. Smart thinking. The offer stands, Mr. Mercer. This frequency is monitored continuously. If you change your mind, we're here to help. The transmission ended. That was either the smartest thing you've done or the dumbest, Daxon said. Time will tell which. She knows about immune survivors, I pointed out. That means I'm not alone. There are others like me. Or she's fishing for victims and you just took the bait. He might have been right, but I'd made a choice, and now we'd have to live with it. The rest of that day was spent preparing for the worst. Daxon and I did weapons maintenance, checked sight lines, reinforced weak points. Lyra organized supplies, calculated ration schedules, and maintained our inventory spreadsheet because structure was how she dealt with stress. In the basement, Mrs. and Chen was still making noise. Scratching at the door, hissing, occasionally letting out these long wails that didn't sound remotely human. We'd need to deal with her eventually, but none of us wanted to be the one to go down there and finish it. Around dusk, something changed. The infected, we'd started calling them that because zombies felt too movie-like and this was real. Their behavior shifted. During the day, the ones we could see through the windows moved slowly, aimlessly, shambling. But as darkness fell, they started moving differently, coordinated, purposeful. "They're hunting," Daxon observed, watching through binoculars. "Look at that. 3 of them moving in formation, checking houses systematically." He was right. The infected were working together, showing a level of intelligence that shouldn't have been possible. And they moved past houses that were obviously empty, focused on ones that showed signs of life. And when they found occupied buildings, they didn't just charge in mindlessly. They probed defenses, tested weak points, waited. "UV light," I said suddenly. "Sunlight inhibits their coordination. At night, when there's no UV radiation, they're smarter." That's not possible. None of this is possible, but it's happening. We watched until full darkness fell, and the infected became predators. They hunted in packs, communicated somehow, used basic tactics. It was terrifying in a way that mindless zombies never could have been. Mindless threats were predictable. These things were learning. A crash from the basement made us all jump. Mrs. Chen was testing the door again, and this time the wood splintered slightly. And she'd been down there for almost 24 hours now, and she wasn't getting weaker. If anything, she was getting stronger. "We need to deal with her," Daxon said, "before she breaks through." "She's a person," Lyra said quietly. "Or she was. She's dangerous, and if she gets out, then we'll deal with it," I interrupted. "But not tonight. We're all exhausted, on edge. We make mistakes when we're tired." It was a delay tactic, and everyone knew it. I didn't want to go down there and put a bullet in someone I'd known for 5 years. Didn't want to be the one who ended Mrs. Chen's existence, even if what was left down there barely qualified as Mrs. Chen anymore. We set up a watch schedule, 2 hours on, 4 hours off, rotating through the night. Daxon took first watch while Lyra and I tried to get some sleep. And she curled up next to me on the couch, and I could feel her hand on my arm, checking my pulse, making sure I was still human. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. What if you turn? What if tomorrow you wake up and you're one of them? Then you do what needs to be done. You protect yourself and the baby, that's all that matters." She started crying, quiet sobs that shook her whole body. I held her and pretended I wasn't terrified, pretended I had answers, pretended the world was going to be okay. We both knew I was lying. Sleep came eventually, though it was fitful and full of nightmares. I dreamed about Mrs. Chen, except in the dream she could talk, and she kept asking me why I let her turn into a monster. I dreamed about the kids on the school bus, about Sheriff Keaton dying alone on Route 22. And I dreamed about my daughter being born into a world that didn't exist anymore. When I woke up, it was still dark, and Lyra was checking my temperature with her hand on my forehead. "You were having a nightmare," she said, "talking in your sleep." "What did I say?" "You kept apologizing to someone named Chen. Who's that?" "Nobody important." I sat up, checked my watch. 4 a.m. "Go back to sleep. I'll take over watch." I relieved Daxon, who looked like hell. He hadn't slept at all during his off shift, just sat there with his shotgun and stared at the windows. Combat veteran insomnia. I recognized it because I'd lived with it for 3 years after coming back from deployment. Any movement? I asked. They're out there, not attacking, just watching, waiting. For what? Hell if I know. Maybe they're smarter than we think. Maybe they're learning our patterns, figuring out the best time to strike. It was a disturbing thought. Intelligence implied strategy. Strategy implied planning. And planning meant we weren't dealing with mindless infected anymore. We were dealing with an enemy. Dawn came slowly, and with it came a change. The infected retreated as sunlight touched them, moving away from our house and back toward darker areas. Abandoned buildings, storm drains, anywhere the UV light couldn't reach. They're photosensitive, I said, documenting everything with my camera. Sunlight doesn't kill them, but it disrupts whatever makes them coordinate at night. During the day, they're running on instinct. At night, they think. How is that possible? Lyra asked. I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. I checked my bite wound again. 24 hours later, it looked like it was 2 weeks old. The flesh was knitting together cleanly, no signs of infection, healing at an accelerated rate that should have been impossible. Kale, Daxon said carefully, that's not normal. I know. I mean, it's really not normal. You should be dead or turned by now. Instead, you're healing faster than you should. Something's wrong with you. Or something's right with me. I survived the bite, Dax. Whatever this infection is, I'm immune to it. Are you, though? Or are you just turning slower? It was a question I'd been avoiding thinking about. What if immunity wasn't permanent? What if I was just delaying the inevitable? What if in a week or a month or a year, I'd wake up and find myself turned into one of those things? Before I could spiral into that particular anxiety, the radio crackled. Not Dr. Holland this time. Someone else, male, younger, panicked. Anyone out there? We're barricaded in the high school gym. Maybe 40 survivors. The infected are outside and we're running low on ammunition. If anyone can hear this, we need... Static swallowed the transmission. I grabbed the radio. This is Cale Mercer. High school, do you copy? Nothing. High school, if you can hear me, stay quiet, don't make noise. The infected are attracted to sound. Repeat, stay quiet and... Breaking through the doors. Oh God, they're inside, they're... Screaming. Gunfire. More screaming. Then silence. 40 people. Just gone. The high school had fallen, just like Daxon predicted. We can't stay here, Daxon said after a long moment. Eventually they'll find us. We need to move. Where? Lyra asked. Every safe zone, every shelter, they're all being overrun. Then we go somewhere without people, somewhere remote. He looked at me. You still have that location up near the old quarry? The one you were going to use for wilderness survival content? I did. An abandoned equipment building 5 miles north, hidden in woods thick enough to make access difficult. No road leading directly to it, no power, no running water. But it was defensible, isolated, and nobody knew about it except me and Daxon. We pack light, I decided. Essential supplies only. We can come back for more if we need to. And Mrs. Chen? Lyra asked quietly. We all looked at the basement door. And the scratching had stopped an hour ago, and now there was just silence. Either she'd given up, or she was waiting. Learning our patterns like the others. We leave her, I said. Lock the door, lock the house, hope she stays contained. It felt like cowardice, but I couldn't face going down there, not yet. Maybe not ever. We packed in silence. Essentials. Food, water filtration, medical supplies, weapons, ammunition. I grabbed my camera equipment, backup batteries, hard drives with all my footage. Lyra took her prenatal vitamins, the ones she only had 2 weeks left of. Daxon loaded his truck with military efficiency, every item packed with purpose. Just before we left, I did one last live stream. The internet was dying, service was intermittent, sites were going down. But I managed to get a connection. Ian, if anyone's still out there, I said to the camera, if anyone's still alive and watching, this isn't random. Something about this outbreak doesn't add up. The infection patterns, the intelligence the infected show at night, the way it spread so fast, this was planned. I don't know by who or why, but someone knew this was coming. Document everything. Trust no one. And if you find other survivors who are immune like me, protect them. They might be the key to understanding what's happening. This is Cale Mercer, Going Dark. If I'm still human in a week, I'll try to broadcast again. I ended the stream and uploaded the footage to every platform I could access before the internet finally died completely. Then we ran. The drive to the quarry should have taken 15 minutes. It took us 3 hours. Roads were blocked with abandoned cars. Infected wandered in random patterns, and twice we had to detour around areas where fires had spread out of control. Millbrook was burning. Not everywhere, but enough. Smoke rose from a dozen different locations, and through the binoculars I could see bodies in the streets. We didn't see any other survivors. The quarry equipment building was exactly as I'd left it from my last scouting trip 3 months ago. Rusted metal walls, broken windows, old machinery scattered around like the apocalypse had already happened here years ago. It smelled like rust and decay, and the floor was concrete that had cracked in a dozen places, but it was shelter. That was all that mattered now. We unloaded quickly, established a perimeter, blocked the most obvious entry points, and Daxon found a spot on the roof with good sight lines in all directions. Lyra organized our supplies in the corner farthest from any windows, and I sat down and tried to process the fact that we'd abandoned our home, our lives, everything we'd built, because the world had ended in less than 48 hours. We need to talk about long-term plans, Lyra said once we'd settled in. This place isn't sustainable. No running water, no heat, and winter's coming. It's June, Daxon pointed out. And I'm due in 8 weeks. You think I'm having a baby in an abandoned quarry with no medical facilities? She had a point. We'd bought ourselves time, but we hadn't solved anything. Eventually, we'd need to find somewhere permanent, somewhere with resources, with other survivors, with some semblance of civilization, even if civilization still existed. One problem at a time, I said. Right now, we survive the week. Then we worry about next month. It was a non-answer, and everyone knew it, but none of us had better ideas. That night, huddled in the equipment building while infected wandered the quarry perimeter. I checked my bite wound one more time. 3 days post-exposure. It looked completely healed, just a faint scar that could have been months old. I was alive, I was human. I'd survived something that should have killed me, and I had no idea why. But I was going to find out, even if it killed me. Days blurred together after that. The quarry became our world, 250 acres of abandoned industrial wasteland that nobody wanted and everybody had forgotten. During the day, we scavenged supplies from nearby areas, always careful, always quiet, learning the infected's patterns. At night, we barricaded ourselves in the equipment building and listened to them hunt outside. The infected's intelligence at night was consistent and terrifying. They learned. We'd set up noise traps one night, tin cans on strings designed to alert us to approaching threats. By the second night, the infected had figured out how to move past them without triggering the alarms. They adapted faster than we could react. They're evolving, I said on day 5, documenting everything with my camera. Or the infection is. Whatever this disease is, it's not static, it's learning alongside them. Daxon was less interested in the science and more concerned with immediate survival. He'd started mapping patrol routes, identifying supply locations, calculating how long our ammunition would last, and his military training was showing. Logistics, tactics, threat assessment. He saw everything as a problem to be solved through preparation and firepower. Lyra was different. She approached survival like an engineering problem. Water collection systems, caloric intake calculations, medical supply usage. She'd created a spreadsheet on her laptop, powered by a small solar panel Daxon had salvaged, tracking every resource down to individual aspirin tablets. "We have a problem," she announced on day 6. "My prenatal vitamins, I'm down to 9 days." "We can stretch them," I offered. "Half doses, maybe. The baby needs full doses, Kale. You can't just have prenatal nutrition and hope for the best." She was right, of course. The baby needed proper nutrients, and skimping on them could lead to developmental issues. But getting more vitamins meant going somewhere dangerous. The local pharmacy had been looted on day 2. We'd need to go further, risk more. "There's a medical supply depot in Butler," Daxon said, studying his map. "About 30 miles. Military installation might still have supplies." "Might also be overrun," I pointed out. "Everything might be overrun. Question is whether we take the risk now or wait until she's completely out." We voted. Decided to go in 3 days, giving us time to scout the route and plan the extraction. 3 days to figure out how to raid a military depot that was probably either abandoned or crawling with infected. On day 7, something changed. I woke up feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, but different. My skin felt too tight, my senses were oversensitive, and when I looked in the broken mirror Lyra had propped up against the wall, my eyes looked slightly yellower than they should have been. "It's starting," I said quietly. Lyra was beside me immediately. "What's starting?" "Whatever the infection does. I'm not immune, I'm just resistant. It's catching up to me." She made me sit down, started checking vitals like she was a doctor and not an agricultural engineer. Temperature slightly elevated, pulse a bit too fast. Pupillary response sluggish. "Maybe it's just stress," she suggested, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "Or maybe immunity isn't permanent. Maybe I bought myself a week and now it's time to pay." Daxon appeared in the doorway. "How bad?" "Don't know yet, could be nothing, could be the beginning of turning." "Then we need protocols. Rules for if you start losing it." He was right, and I hated that he was right. We spent the next hour establishing guidelines. If I showed aggression, they'd restrain me. If I started losing time or memory, they'd lock me in the old supply closet. If I fully turned, they'd... Well, we didn't talk about that part, but we all knew what it meant. The yellowing in my eyes faded by evening. Whatever I'd felt that morning, the wrongness, the sense of infection catching up, it receded. I was myself again mostly, but the incident had shaken all of us. "You need to stop getting exposed," Lyra said that night. "Every time you're near the infected, every time you risk another bite, you're accelerating whatever's happening inside you." "I know. Then stay here. You let Daxon and me handle the supply runs. You're 7 months pregnant, and you're turning into one of them. We're both liabilities in different ways." She wasn't wrong, but the thought of staying behind while they risked themselves felt like cowardice. I'd been the one preparing for this, the one with training, the one who should have been able to handle it, except I was the one most at risk. On day 8, we got our first visitor. Not infected, human. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, stumbling into the quarry with a backpack and a desperate look. Daxon almost shot her before I stopped him. "Wait! I'm human!" she shouted, hands up. "My name's Malin. I saw your smoke yesterday. I've been alone for days. Please don't shoot me." We brought her inside carefully, weapons ready, watching for any signs of infection. She had supplies, enough to suggest she'd been surviving on her own, and more importantly, she had information. "I came from Pittsburgh," she said, accepting the water Lyra offered. "The city fell on day 2. Military tried to hold the bridges, but there were too many infected. I got out before the quarantine line collapsed." "Quarantine line?" Daxon asked. "Yeah. They established a perimeter around the city, said anyone inside had to be screened before they could leave. But screening meant putting people in cages, and when one person turned, they all did. It was a slaughterhouse. She talked for an hour, describing what she'd seen. The breakdown of authority. The way normal people turned on each other when resources got scarce. The infected weren't the only threat anymore. Surviving humans were just as dangerous. There are others like us, she added. Immune people. I saw them in Pittsburgh before I ran. They were being rounded up, taken somewhere. I heard soldiers talking about a research facility. That matched what Dr. Holland had said on the radio. They were collecting immune survivors. The question was why. Did you get bitten? I asked. Malin hesitated, then pulled up her sleeve. On her forearm was a bite mark, partially healed, maybe 4 or 5 days old. Yeah. 3rd day of the outbreak, I thought I was dead. Waited 12 hours for symptoms, nothing. 24 hours, still nothing. Now here I am, still human. I showed her my bite. We compared wounds, symptoms, timeline. Everything matched. She'd been bitten around the same time as me. Showed the same accelerated healing, the same absence of symptoms. How many of us do you think there are? She asked. No way to know. But if Holland's people are actively collecting immune survivors, there must be enough to make it worth their effort. Or we're rare enough to be valuable, lab rats for whatever experiment they're running. That night, with Malin added to our group, we had our first real meeting. The kind where everyone speaks their mind and decisions get made about the future. Daxon wanted to stay mobile, keep moving, avoid detection. Lyra wanted to find a permanent settlement somewhere with other survivors and medical facilities for the baby. Malin wanted to sabotage Holland's facility, free the immune survivors being held there, and I wanted answers. About the outbreak, about the immunity, about why we were special. We go to Butler, I decided finally. Get the medical supplies Lyra needs. Then we make plans based on what we find there. If the depot's been cleared out, we'll know other survivors are operating. If it's untouched, we'll know we're more alone than we thought. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. We spent the next 2 days preparing for the run, mapping routes, identifying fallback positions, rehearsing contingencies. Daxon was in his element, running tactical drills like we were back in deployment. On day 10, we left for Butler at dawn, when the infected were at their least intelligent. 4 of us in Daxon's truck, me, Daxon, Lyra, and Malin. We'd decided Lyra would stay with the vehicle, ready to drive if we needed emergency extraction. Meanwhile, the rest of us went inside. The drive was longer than expected. Roads were worse than before, blocked with abandoned vehicles and infected. We had to detour 3 times, and once we nearly got stuck in a massive pileup where it looked like people had tried to flee and ended up trapped. Butler came into view around noon. The town was bigger than Millbrook, maybe 20,000 people before the outbreak. Now it looked like a war zone. Buildings burned out, streets littered with debris, and infected everywhere. So many infected. This was a bad idea, Daxon muttered. Too late to turn back now, Malin said. She'd proven herself surprisingly capable over the past 2 days, with military precision in her movements that suggested training I hadn't asked about. Our depot's only a mile from here. The military installation sat on the north edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The gate was open, bad sign, but we didn't see obvious signs of infected inside the perimeter. We parked a 1/4 mile away, approach on foot from here. Lyra stayed with the truck, radio in hand, ready to drive to our position if we called for extraction. 30 minutes, I told her. If we're not back in 30 minutes, you leave without us. Cale, promise me, you and the baby get out. That's what matters. She promised, though I could tell she was lying. Lyra didn't leave people behind. It was one of the things I loved and hated about her. We approached the depot carefully, weapons ready, moving in formation like Daxon had taught us. And the fence was intact, but the gate hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Inside, supply buildings sat dark and apparently empty. This feels wrong, Malin whispered. She was right. It did feel wrong. The depot should have been ransacked, fought over, obviously looted. Instead, it looked almost untouched, like people had simply walked away and left everything behind. We went in anyway, because we needed those supplies, and sometimes in the apocalypse you have to take risks that would have gotten you killed in the old world. The main supply building was unlocked. Inside, row after row of shelving units held medical supplies, MREs, water purification tablets, everything we needed and more. It was a treasure trove, completely untouched. "Why wouldn't anyone take this?" Daxon asked, already filling his pack. "Either because they didn't know it was here," Malin suggested, "or because they got here and something went wrong." I was thinking the same thing. This felt like a trap. Too easy, too perfect. That's when we heard the sound, coming from the back of the building. Not infected sounds, human voices, shouting, arguing. We moved toward the noise, weapons ready, and found them in the loading bay. 6 people, armed, wearing civilian clothes but moving with military discipline. They had prisoners. 3 people bound and gagged, kneeling on the concrete, and standing over them was a woman in her late 40s wearing a white lab coat over tactical gear. I recognized her from the radio broadcasts. Dr. Vesper Holland. "Well," she said, looking directly at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Mercer, I was hoping you'd come." We froze. 3 against 7, terrible odds made worse by the fact that Holland's people were clearly professionals. Military or private security didn't matter. They had the training, the positioning, the firepower. Holland's smile widened. "Don't reach for your weapons. My people have excellent reflexes, and I'd prefer not to damage valuable test subjects." "Test subjects," I repeated. "That's what we are to you?" "You're immunity anomalies. Subjects who survived infection when everyone else turned or died. You're the most valuable resource left in this world, and you're wasting your potential hiding in quarries and scavenging for supplies." She gestured to the prisoners. "These 3 made the same mistake, thought they could stay hidden, but I always find what I'm looking for." One of her security team, a woman in her 30s with tactical gear and dead eyes, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we should secure them and move. The noise will attract infected." "Zaria's right," Holland agreed. "Mr. Mercer, you and your companions can come willingly, or we can make this difficult. Your choice." Daxon's hand was inching toward his sidearm. I could see it happening, could see the scenario playing out. He'd draw, get off maybe 1 shot before they cut him down, and then Malin and I would either die fighting or get captured anyway. Lyra would hear the gunfire, hopefully run, but probably come charging in to help and get killed in the process. "We'll come," I said quickly. "Don't shoot." "Kale," Daxon started. "Stand down," I ordered. "We're outgunned and you know it." He hated it. I could see the conflict on his face, but he lowered his hand slowly. Professional soldiers knew when a fight was unwinnable. The trick was surviving long enough to find a fight you could win. Holland's people moved efficiently, zip-tying our hands behind our backs, patting us down for weapons, confiscating everything they found. They were thorough but not cruel, which somehow made it worse. If they'd been thugs or raiders, I could have hated them cleanly. But these were professionals just doing a job in an impossible situation. "The pregnant woman in the truck," Holland said. "Is she immune?" "No," I lied immediately. "She's just my girlfriend. Civilian." "Interesting. And yet you brought her on a supply run into a potentially hostile area?" She studied me. "You're lying, Mr. Mercer. But we'll verify soon enough." They loaded us into a military transport truck, the kind with canvas sides and bench seating. The 3 other prisoners were already there, 2 men and a woman, all looking exhausted and terrified. None of them spoke, which suggested they'd learned that speaking up got you hurt. The truck started moving, but we didn't go far. Maybe half a mile before we stopped, and when the canvas pulled back, we were at another vehicle. Lyra was already there, zip-tied and furious. You said 30 minutes, she spat at me. I waited 40 before they found me. I know. I'm sorry. Holland climbed into the truck with us, which felt like a power move. Most villains stayed far from their captives. The fact that she was sitting 3 feet away suggested either supreme confidence or desperation. Let me explain what happens next, she said. We're going to my facility. You'll be screened, tested, evaluated. Those who cooperate will be treated well. Comfortable quarters, proper food, medical care. Those who resist will be secured until they're ready to cooperate. I don't enjoy causing pain, but I will do what's necessary to advance my research. Research into what? Malin asked. How to create more infected. Research into saving humanity. The outbreak was inevitable. Pathogens evolve, pandemic events occur, civilization falls. But immunity. Immunity changes everything. If I can understand why you survived when others didn't, I can create a vaccine. A real one. One that prevents infection permanently. By experimenting on people without their consent, I said. By doing what needs to be done while there's still a world left to save. She leaned forward. Tell me something, Mr. Mercer. How many people died in Millbrook? 3,000? And how many would die worldwide if this outbreak continues unchecked? Billions. I'm trying to save billions of people, and you're worried about the rights of a few dozen test subjects. It was the classic utilitarian argument. Sacrifice the few to save the many. And the worst part was that she almost had a point. If immunity could be weaponized, turned into a vaccine, it might actually save humanity. But the cost was becoming monsters ourselves. The drive took 3 hours, winding through back roads that avoided major population centers. Holland had clearly mapped safe routes through the outbreak, on areas where infected populations were low enough to pass through without engaging. Every so often we'd see them, small groups wandering aimlessly during daylight, looking almost human until you saw the black eyes and irregular movements. The facility was built into an old mine shaft on the outskirts of what used to be Millbrook's industrial district. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the perimeter. Guard towers at each corner, generators humming in the background. It looked like a prison, which I suppose it was. They processed us individually. Medical examination, blood draw, documentation of bite wounds, and exposure timeline. The doctor doing my examination was thorough but not unkind, a woman in her 60s who looked exhausted. How long since you were bitten? She asked. 11 days, she made a note. Any symptoms? Fever, aggression, memory loss? Some yellowing in the eyes on day 7. It went away. More notes. That's consistent with stage 2 immunity. Your body fought off the initial infection, but there may be residual viral load in your system. We'll need to monitor you closely. What happens if I progress to stage 3? She hesitated. Stage 3 is complicated. Some subjects maintain cognitive function for months. Others degrade rapidly. It depends on individual immune response and exposure frequency. And stage 4? There is no stage 4, Mr. Mercer. Stage 3 is terminal. They put us in cells after that. Not traditional prison cells. These were more like hospital rooms with locks on the outside. Single bed, small bathroom, a window that looked out on the mine's interior courtyard. I could see other cells across the way. Could see faces watching from windows, could count maybe 30 or 40 other prisoners. Lyra was in the cell next to mine. I could hear her through the wall crying quietly, and there was nothing I could do to help her. Daxon was somewhere else in the facility. Malin, too. We'd been separated systematically, isolated, so we couldn't plan or organize. Food came an hour later. Actual hot food, not MREs or canned goods. Chicken, rice, vegetables that looked fresh or at least recently frozen. It was better than anything we'd eaten at the quarry, which was probably the point. Show us that cooperation came with benefits. I ate mechanically, trying to think. We were trapped in a facility run by a doctor who believed she was saving humanity through horrific experimentation. We had no weapons, no tools, no way to contact outside help. And Lyra was 7 months pregnant, due in less than 2 months, probably traumatized by capture and terrified about the baby. The situation was, to put it mildly, completely fucked. That night, I thought it was night, hard to tell without seeing the sun, Holland came to my cell. She didn't bring guards, which felt like another power play. Or maybe she genuinely believed I wasn't a threat. "You're wondering if I'm evil," she said without preamble. "If I'm the villain in this story." The thought crossed my mind. I'm not. I'm a scientist trying to prevent human extinction. The outbreak wasn't random, Mr. Mercer. It was engineered. A bioweapon that got loose or perhaps was released deliberately. I don't know the origin, and frankly, it doesn't matter. And what matters is stopping it before every human becomes infected. By kidnapping people and running experiments on them. By studying the only anomaly in the infection pattern. You. People like you. Whatever makes you immune is the key to everything, and I will find it, with or without your cooperation. She stood to leave, then paused. Your girlfriend is healthy. The baby shows no signs of infection. If you cooperate with my research, I'll ensure she gets the best prenatal care available. If you resist, I'll still study you, but she'll receive only basic medical attention. The choice is yours. Then she left, and I sat there in my comfortable prison cell trying to figure out what the right choice was. Days blurred together after that. They'd run tests, blood draws, tissue samples, cognitive evaluations. The doctor, whose name I learned was Dr. Sarah Reeves, was apologetic but professional. She didn't enjoy what she was doing, but she believed in the mission. "You're unique," she told me during one examination. "Most stage 2 immunes show viral degradation by day 14. You're on day 20 and still maintaining stability. Your immune response is extraordinary. Lucky me. It might be more than luck. Your medical history shows you received the experimental flu vaccine in March. Do you remember that?" I did. There'd been a program offering free vaccines to veterans and first responders, some pharmaceutical company testing a new strain. I'd gotten the shot because it was free and flu season was brutal that year. You think the vaccine did this? I think the vaccine created susceptibility to immunity, not immunity itself, but the biological framework that allowed your system to fight off the infection. It's the only commonality we've found among stage 2 subjects. That was important information. If the vaccine created immunity potential, then everyone who'd received it might be resistant. But that also meant the outbreak might have been triggered by the vaccine itself. Intentional or accidental, the result was the same: worldwide pandemic. I asked about the others. Dr. Reeves was surprisingly forthcoming. "We have 43 immune subjects currently. Most are stage 2 like you. 7 have progressed to stage 3. Cognitive decline, aggression episodes, loss of impulse control. 3 subjects." She hesitated. 3 subjects had to be terminated when they became dangerous. Terminated. You mean killed. I mean they lost all cognitive function and became indistinguishable from infected. At that point, mercy is the only option. It was the reality none of us wanted to face. Immunity wasn't permanent. It was borrowed time, and eventually the debt came due. On day 5 of captivity, something changed. Alarms started blaring in the middle of the night, red emergency lights flashing, and I could hear shouting from the courtyard. I pressed my face against the window and saw chaos. The infected had breached the perimeter. They came in waves, dozens of them, moving with that nighttime intelligence that made them so dangerous. Holland's security forces engaged, firearms lighting up the darkness, but there were too many infected and not enough shooters. The perimeter fence was compromised in 3 places, infected pouring through like water through a broken dam. My cell door swung open. Zaria, Holland's head of security, stood there with a rifle and a grim expression. "Can you fight?" she asked. "You're letting me out?" "The facility's being overrun. Holland wants all mobile subjects armed and defending the interior. You can help us survive this, or you can stay locked up and die when they break through. Your choice." I took the rifle. "Where's Lyra?" "Safe room with the other civilians. She's fine. Now move." The battle was brutal and chaotic. Infected everywhere, security forces falling back to defensible positions, subjects like me suddenly armed and fighting alongside our captors. It was surreal, trying to protect a facility I'd been planning to escape from, defending a doctor who'd kidnapped me. But the alternative was dying, and I'd survive first and deal with moral complications later. I found Daxon in the courtyard surrounded by infected, using a combat knife because he'd run out of ammunition. I covered him with rifle fire, dropped 3 infected before they could reach him, and he nodded thanks without bothering to speak. Marines didn't waste words during firefights. Malin was on the roof with a hunting rifle, picking off infected with impressive accuracy. Every shot found a target, every target went down. She'd clearly done this before, had training that went beyond civilian survival skills. We held them off for 2 hours. 2 hours of constant combat, reloading weapons taken from fallen security forces, falling back through defensive positions that Holland's people had clearly prepared for exactly this scenario. The infected kept coming, wave after wave, and every time we thought we'd cleared them, more appeared from the darkness. Then dawn came, and with it came the shift. The infected lost their coordination as sunlight touched them, reverting to mindless wandering. We picked off stragglers, secured the perimeter, counted our losses. 37 security forces and immune subjects dead, maybe 100 infected terminated. The facility was damaged but intact, the perimeter compromised but repairable. And Holland looked at me across a courtyard full of bodies and said, "Thank you, Mr. Mercer, you saved lives tonight. Don't thank me yet. We're not done talking about the kidnapping and experimentation thing." She almost smiled. Fair enough. They let us eat together after that. Me, Daxon, Lyra, Malin, and a dozen other immune subjects who'd fought. We sat in what used to be a cafeteria, eating hot food and processing what had just happened. "We fought for them," one subject said, a man in his 40s with stage 3 symptoms visible in his yellowing eyes. "We defended our own prison." "We survived," Malin corrected. "Everything else is secondary." "She's right," I agreed. "Holland's still using us for experiments. We're still prisoners, but we're alive. That's what matters right now." Lyra grabbed my hand across the table. "I want to leave. I want our daughter born somewhere safe, not in a military facility run by a mad scientist." "Holland's not mad, and that's what makes her dangerous. She's rational, methodical, convinced she's doing the right thing. Mad would be easier to fight." "Then what do we do?" Before I could answer, Holland's voice came over the PA system. "Attention all residents. In 2 hours, we're holding a facility meeting in the main courtyard. Attendance is mandatory. Dr. Holland out." The meeting was strange. We all gathered, security forces, immune subjects, civilian staff, and Holland stood on a makeshift stage looking exhausted but determined. "Last night proved something important," she began. "We can't do this alone. Security forces can't hold the perimeter indefinitely, and immune subjects can't survive long-term without proper resources. We need each other. So I'm proposing a change in our arrangement." She pulled out a stack of papers. "Through consent forms, each of you will have the opportunity to volunteer for research. In exchange, you'll receive full access to facility resources, comfortable quarters, proper meals, and freedom to move within secure areas. Those who volunteer will be partners in this research, not prisoners." "And those who don't volunteer," someone called out, "will remain in cells until they're ready to reconsider." I won't force cooperation, but I also won't reward resistance." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Mercer, you and your companions saved lives last night. That deserves recognition. I'm offering you and anyone in your group complete freedom within the facility, access to all non-classified research, and a seat at planning meetings. All I ask in return is your continued participation in immunity studies." It was a trap dressed as an opportunity. Accept and we'd be complicit in her research. Refuse and we'd go back to cells, back to being test subjects without any agency. "Can I discuss this with my people?" I asked. "You have 1 hour." We gathered in a corner of the courtyard. Me, Lyra, Daxon, Malin, and 3 other immune subjects who'd attached themselves to our group during the fight. The question was simple. Do we cooperate with Holland or do we resist? "She's offering us a deal," Daxon pointed out. "Better than being prisoners." "She's offering us gilded cages," Lyra countered. "We'd still be trapped here, still subject to her experiments, just with nicer furniture." "But we'd have access to research," Malin said. "We'd access to information about the outbreak, about immunity, about what's really happening. That's valuable." "And we'd be helping her create a vaccine," another subject added. "Isn't that worth some sacrifice?" We debated for the full hour. In the end, it came down to a simple question. What were our alternatives? We couldn't escape. The facility was too secure, Holland's people too professional. We couldn't survive long-term at the quarry. Winter was coming, supplies were limited, and Lyra needed medical care for the pregnancy. Cooperation might be a trap, but it was a trap with food, shelter, and a potential path forward. "We accept," I told Holland when the hour was up. "But I want 2 conditions. First, Lyra gets full prenatal care from qualified medical staff. Second, we get access to all research on immunity and the outbreak. No redactions, no censorship, everything." "Agreed." She held out her hand. I shook it, feeling like I was making a deal with the devil. But sometimes the devil has the only boat off a sinking island. Life in the facility was strange. We weren't prisoners anymore, or at least we weren't treated like prisoners. We had freedom to move through most areas, access to the cafeteria and common spaces, even permission to go outside with security escorts. But we were still trapped, still dependent on Holland's goodwill, still very aware that we were one policy change away from going back into cells. The research was fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. Dr. Reeves gave me full access to her files, and what I learned was both illuminating and terrifying. And the outbreak had started simultaneously in 47 locations worldwide. Not naturally, that pattern was impossible. Someone had released the infection deliberately, coordinating releases to maximize spread and overwhelm response capabilities. Within 72 hours, every major population center was infected. The virus itself was engineered. Dr. Reeves showed me electron microscope images, genetic sequencing, molecular structure. It was based on rabies but heavily modified, with added components that affected cognitive function, sensory perception, and aggression responses. And the UV sensitivity? That was built in deliberately, a feature, not a bug. Why would someone create this? I asked. Population control, maybe. Bioweapon deployment. An experiment gone wrong. Dr. Reeves shook her head. Motivations don't matter. Even what matters is understanding how to stop it. The immunity research was more promising. They'd identified the mechanism. The experimental flu vaccine had included a genetic modifier that enhanced immune response to novel pathogens. It wasn't supposed to create immunity to this specific virus, but it had accidentally provided biological framework for resistance. You're one of approximately 10,000 people worldwide who received that specific vaccine batch, Dr. Reeves explained. Of those, we estimate maybe 30% survived initial infection, so roughly 3,000 immune subjects globally, if they're still alive. 3,000 people out of 8 billion. We were, statistically speaking, nearly extinct as a species. And the progression to stage 3? I asked. Is there any way to stop it? We're working on it. Some subjects maintain stability for months. Others degrade in weeks. We haven't identified the determining factors yet, but we're close. Your case is particularly interesting because you've maintained stage 2 stability longer than any other subject. That was day 15 in the facility, and I'd been bitten 26 days ago. By all accounts, I should be showing stage 3 symptoms by now. But I wasn't. My eyes were still normal, my cognitive function intact, my memory solid. I was an anomaly among anomalies. Lyra's pregnancy was progressing normally, which Dr. Reeves said was remarkable given the stress. The baby showed no signs of infection, heartbeat strong, development on track. They'd set up a proper delivery room in the medical wing, staffed with an actual OB/GYN and 2 nurses. In the apocalypse, that counted as luxury health care. "I want you there," Lyra said one night. "When she's born. I know things are complicated, I know you're being studied like a lab rat, but I need you there. I'll be there, I promise." She looked at me with those eyes that had always been able to see through my bullshit. "Are you scared? About turning?" "Terrified." "Me too." We lay there in her quarters, actual quarters now, not a cell, holding each other and pretending the world outside didn't exist. For a few hours, we could pretend everything was normal, that we were just a couple expecting their first child, worried about normal parent things like names and nurseries and college funds. Then morning would come, and I'd go back to being a test subject. And she'd go back to being 7.5 months pregnant in a military facility during the apocalypse. Normal was a luxury we couldn't afford anymore. Daxon adapted to facility life better than I expected. He'd found common ground with Holland's security forces, former military guys like him who understood discipline and chain of command. They'd accepted him into their rotation, put him on perimeter defense and patrol duties. It gave him purpose, which was what he needed. Marines without a mission tended to spiral. Malin was different. She seemed restless, confined, like a caged animal looking for an exit. She participated in research studies because she'd agreed to, but I could see her cataloging information, mapping the facility, noting weak points in security. "You're planning something," I said to her one day. "It just being observant." "Malin," she sighed. "There are other immune subjects being held here against their will. People who didn't fight during the breach, who didn't earn privileges. They're still in cells, still being experimented on without proper consent. That's not okay. And you want to do what? Break them out? Maybe. Or at least make sure Holland knows people are watching." It was idealistic and dangerous, which made it very Malin. She had this moral clarity that I'd lost somewhere along the way. This belief that right and wrong still mattered even when the world was ending. "Don't do anything stupid," I said. "Define stupid." "Anything that gets you terminated and turned into an infected specimen in Holland's lab." She smiled. "I'll try to avoid that." On day 20 in the facility, everything changed. Pastor Ryland Voss's cult attacked at dawn. They came with military precision and religious fervor, 50 armed zealots convinced they were doing God's work by destroying Holland's facility. They'd somehow acquired military-grade explosives, maybe from overrun National Guard depots, and they used them to breach the perimeter in 4 locations simultaneously. The attack was coordinated with an infected horde, suggesting Voss's people had learned to weaponize the infected the same way I had during the facility breach. They'd herded a massive group of infected toward the facility, then blown the fences, letting the infected pour in while cult members engaged security forces. It was chaos, pure unrestrained chaos. I found myself fighting alongside Holland's security forces again, and this time against humans and infected simultaneously. Daxon was on the wall with a rifle, dropping cult members who were trying to plant more explosives. Malin was coordinating civilian evacuation, getting non-combatants to the secure bunker under the main building, and Holland was in the command center, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Dr. Vesper Holland. We are under attack by religious extremists and infected forces. Any survivors in the area, we need immediate assistance. Repeat, we need..." The broadcast cut off as an explosion took out the communication tower. I found Lyra in the medical wing, helping Dr. Reeves evacuate pregnant women and stage 3 subjects who couldn't fight. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving slower than before, and seeing her in danger made something in my chest tighten. "Ian, you need to get to the bunker," I told her. "I'm helping people." "You're 8 months pregnant, Lyra. You're not helping anyone if you get shot. Go, please." She went reluctantly, and I returned to the fight. The battle lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of constant combat, falling back through defensive positions, protecting the bunker entrance while civilians evacuated. Voss's people were fanatics, willing to die for their cause, which made them dangerous and unpredictable. But we had training, better positions, and ultimately better motivation. They were fighting for an ideology. We were fighting to survive. By the time it ended, half of Voss's cult was dead or captured. The infected had been eliminated or driven off. The facility was severely damaged. One entire wing collapsed, and the perimeter fence destroyed in multiple locations, fires burning in 3 different buildings, and 47 people were dead. Security forces, immune subjects, civilian staff. 47 more bodies added to the apocalypse's tally. Pastor Voss himself was captured alive. Holland had him brought to the courtyard in restraints, and I watched as she questioned him with clinical detachment. "Why?" she asked simply. "You're creating abominations. People who should have died but didn't, who carry the devil's mark. You're trying to spread immunity, to create more people like them. I can't allow that. So you killed 47 people to stop medical research. I killed 47 sinners to prevent the devil's work from spreading, and I'll do it again if given the chance." Holland studied him for a long moment, and then she turned to her security chief. "Put him in a cell, maximum security, no visitors. Ma'am, with respect, he organized an attack that killed our people. Standing orders for hostile forces are..." "I'm aware of standing orders. Put him in a cell." She walked away, and I followed her into the damaged command center. "You should have executed him," I said. "Perhaps. But he's a valuable data point. His cult's actions tell us something important about how survivors are organizing, what ideologies are taking hold. Fear, religious extremism, us versus them mentality. These patterns will define how humanity rebuilds if we rebuild. You're really going to study him like a lab rat?" "I study everything, Mr. Mercer. That's my nature. And speaking of study..." She pulled out a file. "Your latest blood work is remarkable. After 33 days post-exposure, still no stage 3 symptoms. You're rewriting our understanding of immunity progression." "Lucky me." "Luck has nothing to do with it. Your immune response is unique, possibly the key to developing a permanent vaccine. I need to increase the frequency of testing, run more comprehensive studies. Are you willing?" I thought about Lyra, 8 months pregnant. Thought about our daughter who'd be born into this insane world. Thought about the 3,000 immune subjects worldwide who were slowly losing their humanity to stage 3 progression. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. Blood samples, tissue biopsies, continuous monitoring. I'll be honest. It won't be comfortable, but it might save humanity." "Then let's get started." The testing was intensive and painful, and they drew blood every 6 hours, ran cognitive assessments twice daily, monitored my vitals continuously. Dr. Reeves was apologetic but thorough, pushing my limits while trying not to cause permanent damage. "We're seeing something remarkable," she told me after 3 days of intensive study. Your immune cells aren't just fighting the virus, they're adapting to it, learning. It's like your body is in constant evolution, upgrading its defenses in real time. Is that good or bad? I don't know, it's unprecedented. No other subject shows this level of adaptive immunity. You're either going to be the key to saving humanity or an evolutionary dead end. We won't know which until we finish the research. Lyra went into labor on day 37. She'd been having false contractions for weeks, but this time it was real. And I was in the middle of a blood draw when Dr. Reeves got the call. "Your daughter's coming," she said. "Go." I ran to the medical wing, still trailing an IV line that I'd pulled out in my haste. Lyra was in the delivery room, face pale with pain and determination, surrounded by medical staff who actually knew what they were doing. "You're here," she gasped between contractions. "You promised you'd be here." "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of watching Lyra suffer through something I couldn't help with, couldn't fix, couldn't make easier. All I could do was hold her hand and tell her she was doing great, even though I had no idea if she was doing great or if everything was going terribly wrong. Finally, at 3:47 a.m. on day 38, my daughter was born, Serafina Mercer. He's 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy, human, perfect. They cleaned her up and placed her in Lyra's arms, and I watched my girlfriend cry while holding our daughter for the first time. The moment felt sacred somehow, like the universe had carved out this tiny space of pure joy in the middle of hell. "She's beautiful," Lyra whispered. "Kale, look at her. She's perfect." I looked, and she was. Small and wrinkled and perfect, born into the apocalypse but somehow untouched by it. A new beginning in a world of endings. Dr. Reeves checked Serafina thoroughly. No signs of infection, no abnormalities, completely healthy by every metric. The virus hadn't crossed the placental barrier. Lyra's immunity had protected her. "She's going to be okay," Dr. Reeves said. "Both of them are." For the first time in 38 days, I felt something like hope. It lasted approximately 18 hours. That's when Zaria found me in the cafeteria and said 4 words that changed everything. "Holland's gone rogue." "What do you mean, gone rogue?" I asked. Zaria pulled me into a side corridor, checked to make sure we weren't being monitored. "She's been running experiments that weren't approved, using stage 3 subjects without consent, testing infection vectors, trying to weaponize the virus. Security just found out. There's going to be a coup. A coup, in the middle of the apocalypse. When better? Half the security forces are loyal to Holland. Half think she's crossed too many lines. If we don't act now, if we don't establish clear command structure, this place will tear itself apart." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're neutral. You're not military, not a scientist, just a guy trying to survive and protect his family. People trust you. Both sides trust you. You can mediate, prevent bloodshed. Or I could take my family and run while you all kill each other." "Where would you go?" "It's winter now, Kale. Snow on the ground, temperatures dropping. Your daughter is 3 days old. You think she'll survive out there?" She had a point. Running wasn't an option with a newborn. We were trapped in the facility's politics, whether we liked it or not. "What do you want me to do?" "Talk to both sides, find a compromise. Help us avoid a war we can't afford." The situation was complicated. Holland had been conducting experiments that pushed ethical boundaries, testing stage 3 subjects to see how far they could be controlled before losing cognitive function. And some subjects had agreed. Others hadn't been given a choice. The security forces were split. The military-trained personnel believed in chain of command and following orders, even questionable ones. The civilian contractors believed some orders shouldn't be followed, that there were lines even the apocalypse didn't justify crossing. I spent 2 days talking to everyone. Holland defended her actions as necessary for research. The loyalists supported her. The opposition wanted her removed from command and tried for crimes against humanity. There's no room for ethics in survival, Holland argued. Every day we waste debating morality is a day humanity inches closer to extinction. I'll do whatever it takes to find a cure. Even if it means becoming monsters ourselves, I countered. What's the point of saving humanity if we lose our humanity in the process? Easy to say when you're not the one making impossible choices. Try being responsible for 3,000 people's survival and see how your ethics hold up. She wasn't wrong. I'd made compromises too. Fought alongside captors, accepted deals with devils, prioritized my family over strangers. The apocalypse demanded moral flexibility. But there were still lines. Had to be. Otherwise, we were just infected with different symptoms. The compromise I brokered was imperfect. Holland would remain in command, but a civilian oversight committee would approve all experiments involving human subjects. Security forces would report to both Holland and an elected representative from the immune subject population. Research would continue, but with transparency and accountability. Neither side loved it, which meant it was probably fair. The peace lasted 6 weeks. During that time, winter settled in hard. Snow accumulated 2 feet deep, temperatures dropped below zero, and supply runs became dangerous enough that we rationed carefully. The infected seemed less active in extreme cold, which was both a relief and concerning. Where were they going? Were they adapting, finding shelter, conserving energy? Serafina grew, healthy, normal, showing all the right developmental milestones. Lyra was an amazing mother despite everything, managing to create routines and normalcy in chaos. We had a corner of the residential wing that felt almost like home. My immunity held stable. Day 60, 70, 80, no stage 3 symptoms. Dr. Reeves was ecstatic. I was breaking every pattern, rewriting every understanding of immunity progression. You're producing antibodies at an accelerated rate, she explained. Every exposure to infected or infected tissue seems to strengthen your resistance rather than weakening it. You're not just immune, you're becoming super immune. Is that even possible? Apparently it is. You're living proof. The research was progressing. Dr. Reeves had isolated the specific genetic markers that enabled immunity, identified the cellular mechanisms that prevented infection. She was close, maybe months close, to developing a working vaccine. But she needed more data, more subjects, more time we didn't have. On day 83, everything went wrong at once. First, Pastor Voss escaped. Someone, never identified, left his cell unlocked during a guard shift change. He'd killed 2 guards and disappeared into the winter night before anyone noticed. Second, a supply convoy was ambushed. 12 people dead, 3 vehicles destroyed, a month of supplies stolen by raiders who were apparently organized enough to coordinate attacks. Third, and most critically, we lost communication with the other research facilities. Holland had been coordinating with 3 other locations worldwide: Japan, Germany, Australia. All 3 went dark within 24 hours of each other. Coordinated attack, Zarya said during the emergency briefing. Someone's targeting research facilities systematically. Who? Holland demanded. Who has the resources and organization to launch coordinated global strikes during an apocalypse? Maybe someone who doesn't want a cure developed, someone who benefits from continued chaos. It was a disturbing thought, but plausible. In collapse scenarios, some people thrived. Warlords, raiders, anyone with stockpiles and weapons. A cure would restore order, reimpose civilization, eliminate their advantages. Better to let the world burn if you're profiting from the flames. We need to accelerate research, Holland decided. If someone's hunting facilities, we might not have time to do this safely. Dr. Reeves, what's minimum timeline for vaccine testing? 3 months for proper trials, maybe 6 for safety verification. Not good enough. What if we skip trials? Dr. Reeves looked horrified. We could kill everyone we vaccinate. Without testing, we don't know dosage, side effects, efficacy. But we might save humanity, calculated risk. It's murder. We'd be no better than whoever caused the outbreak. They argued for an hour while I sat there holding Serafina, thinking about the choice. Rush the vaccine and risk killing people with the cure, or take time we might not have and risk never developing it at all. There was no good answer. In the end, Holland made a decision that would haunt all of us. Voluntary human trials. Anyone who wanted to risk the untested vaccine could volunteer. No coercion, no pressure, just the option for those who'd rather die trying than live as potential carriers. 17 people volunteered. 17 immune subjects in various stages of immunity progression, in all willing to be test subjects for an experimental vaccine that might kill them. Why? I asked one volunteer, a woman in her 20s who'd been bitten 60 days ago and was starting to show stage 3 symptoms. Why risk it? Because I'm dying anyway. Stage 3 is terminal. This way, maybe my death means something. Maybe I help find a cure. They administered the vaccine on day 87. Dr. Reeves oversaw everything, monitoring subjects continuously, ready to intervene at the first sign of adverse reaction. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Then subjects started seizing. 3 died immediately from anaphylactic shock. 4 more developed severe neurological symptoms, seizures, hallucinations, loss of motor control. The remaining 10 showed mild reactions but survived. Pull the plug, Dr. Reeves ordered. And this isn't working, we're killing people. Wait, Holland said. Look at Subject 7. Subject 7 was showing remarkable recovery. The seizures had stopped, vital signs stabilizing, and his blood work showed something extraordinary. The virus was gone, completely eliminated from his system. It's working, Holland breathed. In at least one subject, it actually worked. But 7 people had died to learn that. 7 volunteers who'd trusted the research, who'd believed their sacrifice would mean something. I thought about that woman who'd said she wanted her death to mean something. Well, it did. It meant we knew the vaccine could work. It also meant we knew it could kill. That night, unable to sleep, I found Malin on the roof. She'd been distant since the trials, disturbed by what she'd witnessed. Your 7 people died today, she said without preamble. 7 people, and Holland's calling it progress. 1 person lived. 1 person was cured. That's not nothing. Tell that to the 7 dead volunteers. Tell their families that their sacrifice was worth it. Malin, I'm done, Cale. Done with this place, done with Holland, done with sacrificing people for the greater good. There has to be another way. What other way? We need the vaccine. You know that. I know I'm not okay with killing people to get it. She looked at me. Are you? I didn't have an answer. The next week was tense. Security forces were jumpy after Voss's escape. Research continued despite the failed trials, Dr. Reeves working around the clock to refine the vaccine. And everyone waited for the other shoe to drop. And it dropped on day 94. Pastor Voss returned with an army. Not the ragtag cult from before. This was organized. Maybe 300 armed fighters with military vehicles, heavy weapons, and a plan. They'd spent 6 weeks recruiting, organizing, building a force capable of overwhelming our defenses. And they attacked at night, when the infected were most intelligent, coordinating their assault with a massive infected horde they'd somehow corralled and weaponized. The battle was apocalyptic. We were outnumbered 4-1, outgunned, fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Voss's forces breached the perimeter in 6 places. Infected poured through the gaps. Security forces fought desperately, knowing that losing meant death or worse. I found myself fighting alongside Daxon again. I'm the 2 of us holding a choke point while civilians evacuated to the bunker. Malin was somewhere else in the facility, coordinating defense. Lyra was in the bunker with Serafina, hopefully safe. "We can't hold," Daxon shouted over gunfire. "They're going to break through." He was right. We were being overwhelmed. For every infected we dropped, 2 more appeared. For every cult member we killed, their friends pressed harder. Then Holland's voice came over the facility speakers. "All personnel fall back to the central bunker. I repeat, fall back. We're implementing Protocol Omega." "What's Protocol Omega?" I asked. Daxon's face went pale. "Facility self-destruct. She's going to blow the whole place." We ran, through corridors filled with infected past positions being overrun, in toward the central bunker that would hopefully withstand the explosion. Other survivors were converging on the same location, a desperate race against time. I saw Malin helping a Stage 3 subject who'd been injured. Saw Zarya covering a retreat, firing controlled bursts while falling back. Saw Dr. Reeves clutching research data, unwilling to abandon her work even to save her life. We made it to the bunker with minutes to spare. The heavy doors sealed behind us, locking out the infected and cult members and ensuring we'd either survive together or die together. Holland was at the control panel, hand hovering over the detonation switch. "Everyone accounted for?" Zarya checked tablets. 73 personnel in bunker, 42 confirmed dead or missing, an unknown number of immune subjects trapped in other areas. "We're leaving people behind," someone shouted. "We don't have a choice. If I don't detonate now, everyone dies when Voss reaches the research wing. This way, some of us survive." "You're a murderer." "I'm a pragmatist, and I'm sorry." She pressed the switch. The explosion was massive. Even in the bunker, reinforced and deep underground, we felt the shock wave. The lights flickered, supports groaned, and dust rained from the ceiling. Above us, the facility was being destroyed. Buildings collapsing, infected and cult members caught in the blast, years of research going up in flames. When the shaking stopped, we waited. Protocol required 6 hours in the bunker before opening the doors, letting debris settle and fires burn out. 6 hours trapped underground with 73 traumatized people processing what had just happened. Lyra found me in the crowd, Serafina crying in her arms. "Is it over?" "I don't know. Maybe." 6 hours later, we emerged into devastation. The facility was gone. Just rubble and smoke and snow slowly covering everything. Bodies everywhere, infected cult members, our people. The death toll was catastrophic. But we'd survived. 73 people had made it to the bunker. And buried in the rubble was research that might save humanity if we could retrieve it. "What now?" Daxon asked. Holland looked at the ruins of her life's work, and for the first time I saw her cry. "Now we rebuild, or we die trying." The next weeks were brutal survival. We had no shelter except the bunker, which wasn't designed for long-term habitation. Temperatures dropped further, supplies were limited, and we had to scavenge the ruins while fending off infected attracted by the explosion. But we found something in the rubble. Dr. Reeves's research data, backed up on encrypted drives protected by waterproof cases, somehow intact despite the explosion. The vaccine formula was recoverable. "We can't test it here," Dr. Reeves said. "We need facilities, equipment, controlled environments." "Then we go somewhere that has those things," Holland decided. The military was establishing safe zones before communications went down. We find one, bring them the research, let them complete the trials. "That's hundreds of miles in winter conditions," Daxon pointed out. "We'll lose people. We'll lose everyone if we stay here. At least moving gives us a chance." So we prepared to leave, packed what supplies we could salvage, organized into groups small enough to be mobile but large enough to defend against threats, mapped routes to potential safe zones. And on day 103, we abandoned the facility ruins and started walking north toward rumors of a functioning military installation 200 miles away. The journey was hell. Winter travel in apocalypse conditions with infected and raiders and weather all trying to kill us. We lost people to exposure, to attacks, to simple bad luck. By the time we'd traveled 50 miles, we were down to 58 survivors. But Serafina was alive. Lyra was alive. Daxon and Malin were alive. We'd protected the people who mattered most, even as strangers around us died. On day 115, we saw it. Safe Zone Delta. A military installation that had survived the outbreak, established protocols, built defenses. Walls 20 feet high, guard towers, organized patrols. Civilization, or what passed for it now. We approached carefully, hands visible, weapons holstered. The guards were professional, skeptical, but not hostile. They searched us, screened us for infection, questioned us extensively. Finally, they let us in. Inside the safe zone were maybe 3,000 people, survivors from across the region, all gravitating toward the military's protective umbrella. There were schools for children, medical facilities, even a working electrical grid powered by generators and solar panels. It looked like hope, like maybe humanity wasn't finished after all. We were processed, unassigned housing, given ration cards. Holland and Dr. Reeves were brought to meet with the zone's leadership, presenting the vaccine research. I watched from a distance as military scientists examined the data, discussed possibilities, debated timelines. Maybe we'd finally done it. Maybe we'd brought the key to ending the outbreak. But I was still changing. Day 120, I started experiencing memory gaps. Nothing severe, just minutes here and there, but it was the beginning. Stage 3 was catching up to me. My borrowed time was running out. How long? Lyra asked. Months, maybe. Dr. Reeves thinks my unusual immunity might mean longer progression, but she doesn't know. And when it happens, you do what needs to be done. You protect Serafina, you survive, she cried. I held her, and we both pretended I'd be there to see our daughter grow up. The safe zone had rules. Everyone worked, everyone contributed, and immune subjects like me? We were valuable but also dangerous. They wanted us monitored, studied, contained if we showed stage 3 symptoms. I agreed to monitoring. What choice did I have? But I refused containment, refused to spend my remaining time locked up while my daughter grew up thinking her father was a monster. Days turned into weeks. The vaccine trials progressed. Dr. Reeves worked with the Safe Zone's researchers, refining the formula, conducting careful trials with voluntary subjects. This time they took it slow, tested thoroughly, didn't rush. And it worked. Not every time. Some subjects still had adverse reactions, but the survival rate improved from 10% to 40%, then 60, then 80. By day 140, they had a viable vaccine. Not perfect, but good enough. They started mass production, began vaccination campaigns, sent teams to other safe zones with supplies and knowledge. Humanity was fighting back. I lasted until day 162. That's when the major memory gap started, when I began losing hours instead of minutes. Stage 3 was progressing, accelerating, and I couldn't stop it. Lyra knew. She'd been watching, documenting, preparing for the inevitable. We'd made plans for when I couldn't be trusted around Serafina anymore. Protocols for ensuring everyone's safety, including mine. I'm scared, I told her one night. Me too. Take care of her. Make sure she knows I loved her, that I fought for her, and that every decision I made was trying to give her a future. She'll know. I promise. On day 170, I woke up covered in blood. Not mine. Infected blood. I'd apparently spent the night hunting infected in the woods outside the safe zone, killing them during a fugue state, unable to remember any of it. That's when I knew. It was time. I reported to medical, explained what was happening. Dr. Reeves examined me, confirmed stage 3 progression was accelerating. How long do I have? Days, maybe weeks if we're lucky. But you're becoming dangerous, Kale. Not to yourself, to others. The infection is taking over. They wanted to quarantine me, lock me up until I fully turned, then terminate me humanely. It was the protocol, the safe thing to do. But I had one more thing to accomplish first. I'd been documenting everything since day one. Camera footage, written accounts, recordings of Dr. Reeves's research. Evidence of what had happened, how immunity worked, what needed to be done to save humanity. I compiled it all into a single testament. A record for Serafina, for future generations, for anyone who wanted to understand how we survived the apocalypse. If you're hearing this, I recorded, it means I stayed human long enough to finish the story. My name is Cale Mercer. I was a survival content creator who thought he was prepared for the end of the world. I wasn't. Nobody was. But we survived anyway. The outbreak was deliberate. Someone engineered the virus and released it worldwide. We don't know who or why, and maybe we never will. But we fought back, developed immunity, created vaccines. He rebuilt civilization from ruins. I'm dying now. The infection is taking me piece by piece, and soon there won't be enough of me left to matter. But before I go, I want you to know, we won. Humanity survived. And if you're listening to this, if you're reading this account, that means the future exists. That means our sacrifices meant something. To my daughter Serafina, I'm sorry I can't be there as you grow up. Sorry you'll only know your father through recordings and stories. But know that I loved you. That every choice I made, every risk I took was to give you a world worth living in. To everyone else, don't waste this. We paid too high a price for survival to squander it on the same mistakes that led to the outbreak. Build something better. Something worth the cost. This is Cale Mercer signing off. And whatever happens next, someone needed to witness it. Someone needed to document it. And I'm glad it was me. I ended the recording on day 175. By day 180, I couldn't trust myself around people. The fugue states were lasting hours, and during them I was dangerous, aggressive, unpredictable, more infected than human. Lyra and I said our goodbyes. She brought Serafina one last time, and I held my daughter knowing I'd never hold her again. She was beautiful, growing so fast, would never remember her father except through recordings. Be good for your mom, I whispered. Be strong, be brave, and know I loved you more than anything. Then security took me to quarantine, a comfortable room with reinforced doors and monitoring equipment. They'd keep me there until I fully turned. Then end it humanely. Mercy, they called it. I called it the only option left. I spent my last coherent hours writing letters. To Lyra, apologizing for everything. To Serafina, hoping she'd understand someday. To Daxon, thanking him for being my brother through everything. To Malin, telling her to keep fighting for what's right. And to Dr. Reeves, finish the work. Save everyone I couldn't. Make this mean something. On day 183, I stopped recognizing people. Lyra came to visit, and I called her by a stranger's name. The infection had taken my memories, leaving only instinct and hunger. On day 186, Dr. Reeves made the call. I was gone. What remained was infected, wearing my face, and keeping it alive served no purpose except cruelty. They say I fought at the end, in that even in the final moments, some part of me recognized what was happening and chose death over becoming a monster. That I made it easier for them. I don't know if that's true. I wasn't there anymore to know, but Lyra was there. And Daxon. And Malin. They watched as Dr. Reeves ended my suffering, and they made sure I didn't die alone. My last conscious thought, the last thing I remember being truly me. Worth it. Everything I went through, everyone I lost, all the compromises and sacrifices and moral flexibility required to survive. It was worth it. Because Serafina would grow up in a world that still existed. Because the vaccine worked. Because humanity survived. My story ends there. But yours doesn't. If you're hearing this, if you survive to listen to this recording, then you're part of what comes next. In the rebuilding, the recovery, the future we fought so hard to preserve. Don't waste it. Live, love, remember, and build something better than what came before. This is Cale Mercer, 186 days post-infection, signing off for the last time. I hope I stayed human long enough. Epilogue 15 years later. My name is Serafina Mercer, and I never knew my father. Not really. He died when I was 3 months old, turning into one of the infected he'd spent his life fighting. But I know his story. My mom made sure I knew. She played me his recordings, showed me his footage, told me about the man who documented the apocalypse, who survived 93 days longer than any other stage 2 immune, who helped develop the vaccine that saved humanity. The world's different now. We rebuilt, slowly, and carefully, learning from mistakes, trying to avoid the patterns that led to outbreak. There are still infected out there. Remote areas, isolated pockets, places where the virus survived despite vaccination campaigns. But they're contained. Managed. No longer an existential threat. The safe zones grew into cities. Cities grew into civilizations. We're not back to where we were before. Probably never will be. But we're somewhere new. Maybe somewhere better. I'm studying epidemiology at New Pittsburgh University, following in my father's footsteps in a weird way. He documented diseases, I study them. He fought infection with immunity. I fight it with knowledge. Mom's doing well. Remarried 5 years ago to a man named Derek who treats her kindly and never tried to replace Dad. He knew he couldn't. How do you replace someone who sacrificed themselves to save the world? Uncle Daxon, not actually my uncle, but that's what I call him, runs security for the university. Still military after all these years, still training people to fight threats most of them will never face. He tells me stories about Dad sometimes. The good ones. The ones where they were just friends planning for disasters that seemed impossible. And Dr. Reeves. She won a Nobel Prize last year. Posthumous. She died 3 years ago, finally succumbing to stage 3 after holding out longer than anyone thought possible. But her vaccine work saved billions. Literally billions. The world owes her everything. I watch my father's recordings sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, when the research gets heavy. I watch him talk about survival, about immunity, about loving my mom and wanting the best for me. He looks so young in the videos, 32. Same age I am now. It's strange being older than your father was when he died, outliving him, having more life experience than he ever got. But I try to honor his legacy, try to be someone he'd be proud of. Someone who builds instead of destroys, who helps instead of harms, who makes the sacrifice mean something. There's a memorial in the city center, a wall with names of everyone who died during the outbreak. Millions of names carved in stone remembering the cost. My father's name is there. Cale Mercer, 2026 to 2027. Survived 186 days post-infection. Helped develop immunity vaccine, documented the outbreak for future generations. Under his name, there's a quote from his last recording. Build something better than what came before. We're trying, Dad. We're really trying. And I think maybe we're succeeding. The end. Author's note. This story is dedicated to everyone who survived impossible situations through stubbornness, adaptation, and refusal to give up. The apocalypse may be fictional, but the resilience is real.